and we need to do a lot of listening. Yeah? So I have my notepad, which I hope is here. Take notes. And I want to hear what the issues are. Especially I want to hear from young people. And rather than a kind of dump of problems, let's raise questions that others want to answer. So we format it in that way. Kamlesh, you are here? Please, you are on the panel? Yeah, please come. Please.
Well, I thought I was going to do something there.
Okay, we thought rather than a presentation, we'd have interactive. Yeah. Because let's respond to the issue they have, rather than a monologue, because any one of us could go on talking for a whole day. We love to do that. But I think it's a session worthwhile. So it could, whether it is, how do we live both Vedic and modern at the same time, or how do we live independently of parents and do other things and all that, or whether it is, Vedic thought as taught to us is not very scientific, and not one of the things I heard this morning is it's not meaningful, it's not relevant the way it's taught, or whether it is, why do we need a Hindu identity if everything is same. Whatever is your burning issue, I'd like to hear that. I'll make a note of it. And then we'll select a few issues. After we've heard 1 minute each, we will select a few issues and throw it open to have other people respond and discuss those 2 or 3 issues. Because if we can just focus on 2 or 3 important issues and have a brainstorm, maybe that's an experiment we'll try. So just
1 minute each. Anybody can start. 1 minute each. Youth only. 1 minute each.
What are you going to do?
Could you just let
You have to be clear who is a youth and who is not a youth.
I thought that you...
My first question was, if we consider ourselves Hindu and we say that all people are created equal, our animals are created equal, everyone's equal because we all have the same atma and all of that, then why is it that we keep segregating ourselves? We say he's Christian, he's Muslim, he's whatever, he's Brahmin, he's whatever. So my first question is, if we're trying to develop unity within ourselves, shouldn't we stop trying to diversify ourselves and see that we're all Hindu and it doesn't matter whether you're Muslim or Christian or whatever, you're still Hindu? Because Hinduism isn't a religion, it's a way of life, so as long as you encompass that way of life, you should be considered Hindu.
Okay, good point. I will repeat that. Next. Next point.
And if we keep saying that Hinduism is not a religion but a way of life, then it shouldn't matter who we marry, because as long as they live the ways prescribed by the Dharmic religion, then it doesn't matter what religion they are. So inter-religion marriage shouldn't be such a big issue in our community. And finally, if we want a more focused youth, then how can we have that when our parents are pushing our priority towards education? Our parents are saying, get a master's, get a PhD, be productive in this world, and that's great. It's important to be educated in this country, but why don't we have our parents pushing for the same thing in the spiritual aspect as well, in the religion aspect as well? They tell you, oh, it's Diwali, go to the temple. Oh, it's your birthday, go to the temple. But why are they not pushing us to study the literature that we're being given? That's the 3 questions that I wanted to pose.
I've written those down, and we'll take a few more questions and then we'll consolidate the questions. Yeah. Let's hear Nikhil. Yeah.
Hello, I'm very happy to see everyone here and participating today on a Sunday afternoon. My main point here to discuss, and I don't have any questions to throw out at this point, but I'm sure we'll get significant feedback, is what can we do to sustain our faith in the West amongst our youth? That seems to be a major concern amongst second generations and generations to come, me included, because I have 2 young kids. What can we do to make sure that going forward, our kids can feel the pride that they should feel in who they are, not only as an American, but as an Indian American and a Hindu American? And I think that's the most important thing that we need to instill in them, and that's some of the things I'd like to talk about.
I guess I also don't have many questions, but I think something that I'd like to touch on during the session is how can we make it relevant to our lives on a daily basis? When I remember I had a talk once at one of the HSC events, how the Bhagavad Gita will get you into medical school, and we had about 250 people show up for that event. And as you can imagine, it's actually really funny because it actually had nothing to do with medical school, but simple practices that you can use in daily life, whether you're going to medical school, business school, law school, or in general, whether you're not going to school. But the fact that you put medical school in the title attracted a large proportion of people. And that just tells you that there's an interest in anything that can be applied to daily life. And I don't think that we understand. My parents, for example, tell me to meditate and do yoga every day. And they do it. They do pranayama every morning. They watch Sanatan, they have lectures in the morning, and they do it. But I don't think we realize the impact it has on our lives. We try it for a few days. It doesn't really make a difference, so we kind of wash it away. We don't see the benefits on a long-term basis. So that's my question.
So, what I've written down, I'm going to recap. I think they all revolve around the common theme of Hindu identity. And when I'm reading these questions, think about it as issues of Hindu identity. So one of them I wrote is, why are we segregating religions, like I'm a Hindu, he's a Christian, and why this distinctiveness of Hindu identity? That's a question about Hindu identity in a sense. Like, is Hindu identity relevant? Okay, or is there even such a thing as a Hindu identity? Second question is another variation of the same thing. If Hinduism is a way of life, okay, if it's just a way of life, then what's the issue about intermarriages? That's also an identity issue. It's an issue that why is there an identity which separates the other from us, and so sees intermarriage as a kind of an issue. The third one is also an identity issue. What can we do to sustain Hinduism in the West among the youth? So that too is an identity issue, Hinduism. Because if you separate identity from practices, breathing is not an identity. You don't say, my identity is I breathe. Okay? Breathing anyone can learn, no matter what faiths they are, what identity they are. I mean, you could be in Al-Qaeda sitting in a prison, you can learn breathing. You can. You could be a drug culture person, you could learn breathing. So, if you are merely a collection of practices, like breathing, like asanas, then there is no need for an identity for that. You can, it's like saying, I eat dosa, or I eat pizza. There's no identity about it, it's just a way of life. So that's a very important question, that is Hinduism merely a set of practices. And these practices are unbundled, which means like clip art, you can cut and paste. Like when you download clip art on the computer, you can copy something, paste it here, copy something, paste it there. If Hinduism is a bunch of unrelated, sporadic, clip art-like practices, you can incorporate and pick like an a la carte or buffet. You can pick out what you want and just incorporate it in your life. Then there is no such thing as Hinduism.
A la carte is the Muslim version.
Yeah, okay. So I'm still trying to get this point across. Then the fourth question was, how can we make Hinduism relevant to our lives? Again, are we talking about Hinduism as an identity, or are we talking about Hinduism as a collection of practices? Because if it's a collection of practices with nothing cohesive, no integrity, no need for a separate identity per se that holds these practices together, then those practices you can pick and choose the one you want into any identity. Then you can have a Christian doing pranayama, and of course you can do pranayama, it'll give you the same benefits. So I think the common thread I see in all of these questions is, is there a Hindu identity? What is it if it's just a way of life? And what is the relevance of such an identity? Does it have any benefits today? And then we can ask questions like, how do we protect it and propagate it and so on. So really the core question that you have, seeing all of you, is the nature of Hindu identity. Now I have a lot to say on what is Hindu identity, what is distinct about it, why there is a Hindu identity over and above all the practices. You can have all the practices, this one, that one, that one. But in addition to all that, there is something called Hindu identity which has a certain value, and then we can talk about things like, how then from there you can talk about intermarriages. Only if you have understood what is Hindu identity. Only then can you talk about intermarriages, because inter means A and B, but you need to understand what the heck is A. What is A that is entering with some other religion? Yeah? Now, do you want me to spend 2 or 3 minutes giving you my perspective on identity, or do you want to throw it open and we can hear other people's ideas on Hindu identity, what it is and why it's relevant? If you have people raising hands, I would like people to hear Otherwise, I have something to say about Hindu identity as well. But anyone on the panel? Okay. Okay, I will tell you my ideas because I researched this very carefully. We live in America, and first forget who we are and the question about Hinduism, and let's understand America as a land of identities in which we live. America has always been a land of identities. The earliest people called themselves pilgrims, and they called themselves Englishmen, and the other was Indian. The Native Americans were Indian. After the colonies, the initial colonies, had people from other countries besides England. They had Germans and they had various other kinds of countries. It was no longer appropriate to use the identity English. Then they started calling us, then the us became Christian. So the identity became Christian and the other became heathen. So it was the land of identities, right from the beginning. Then the Native Americans got converted. They also became Christian. So how do you identify the us? You cannot say Christian anymore because it goes, brown-skinned people are also Christian now. So the identity became known as white. It happened in the 1630s, 1640s that the identities became known as white. And there were white laws, white privilege, white marriage, white this and white that, and the others were non-white. So American identity shifted from Englishman to Christian to white. Yeah? And then became, previously the Irish and the Italians, the Catholics were excluded, and then they had fights and violence, and before they were allowed to become classified as white mainstream Americans. And so the religion of America shifted from Protestant to Christianity because Catholics got included. And there's a book called How the Irish Became White, which I'd like one of you to read. You will really understand the identity formation in America. And then there is another one called How the Jews Became White Folks, which also I recommend you to read. Because until 1940s and 1950s, the Jews did not think of themselves as white people. This is a Jewish anthropologist writing a book saying that her grandmother's generation did not think of themselves as white people, and nor did the white people think of Jews as among them. So there was a very clear delineation of us them, and hence the identity had to be fought for them to become white. So this is the trajectory of becoming assimilative. These are the assimilative people who said we assimilate and we do not have a distinct identity. What is common to these assimilative people is A, they were all European origin, and B, they were all Judeo-Christian. So they were assimilatable. Blacks did not enjoy the same privilege. They were never assimilatable. So blacks made a separate identity for themselves. Okay? Now come the Hispanics, who are closest in their identity dilemma to the way Indians are. Hispanics have a debate internally between those who believe they are white and those who believe they are Hispanic. And the question is, well, if you are Hispanic, what defines you? Hispanics are Christians, so what is making us different from other Americans? And their marker, their signature, their logo of difference is Spanish language. So they've decided that we will fight for Spanish language as having rights in America, and this is so important because as long as there's Spanish language, there is this identity known as Spanish, the Hispanics. And the moment that Spanish language disappears, we will not be able to keep our separate identity. So there's a huge identity war going on. Now there is another identity war with gays in this country. There's an identity war with Muslims in this country. There's an identity war with Chinese Americans in this country. So the point I'm making is, it is not I who made America a land of identities, nor you, nor are you going to be able to change it. It's the character of America. That when you are American, you're also another identity along with it. You're Irish American, Italian American, Japanese American, Black American, Hispanic American, and so on, Jewish American. So when you talk about, well, why do we need an identity? Frankly, I defined my identity only after I came to America and understood that the Americans expect me to have an identity. I can either deny it, in which case they define my identity, or I can claim an identity, and in which case I define my own identity. So the choice in America is not an identity-less society because the rest of the Americans are not identity-less. And therefore, until the mainstream America changes, which it is not about to in your lives also, It is not about the change. Despite all this postmodernism and Broadway theatre, that's very good for postmodernist culture. But the deep cultures of power are identity based. So if that is the nature of the Kurukshetra and the nature of the society, as a realistic person, I have to just accept that that's what it is. And I choose to create a positive identity for myself, which I can project, which I can define, which I can live in, because that's what Americans expect everybody to be, is to have a certain identity. Yeah? So before you talk about Hindu identity, you must understand identity formation history in America. You guys are born and raised in USA, which I wasn't. You should have more knowledge about American history because you're born Americans. I'm an immigrant American, but I have taken the time and I've really studied for years and years the history of immigration in America and the history of the identity formation in America. And I've read through histories and written here, there, and all that stuff. Gone to conferences and talked about American identity history. So every Hindu and every Hindu leader should first understand how prior groups of immigrants had to deal with identity issues, which we now have to deal with. Because you're often accused, hey, why are you trying to be different? Tell the Irish guy, why were the Irish different? Why is there Irish Day parade? Why is there this the green, St. Patrick's parade? Why is there this Italian stuff going on? Why is there New York filled with Chinese parade? America is a land of identities. There is so many historical societies in America. There are historical societies of every particular ethnic group claiming with pride their history in America. It's not just Ellis Island Museum. It is not just, if you do Google search on historical societies in America, you will find that there are tens of thousands of government-registered official historical societies across America. And most of them have to do with some, Italian group from there or some Spanish group from there, and they all are very, very proud of preserving this identity. So I would kick off this by saying that we Hindus have to understand that there is therefore need for a Hindu identity. And if you are identity-less, you're actually disempowering yourself. That's the starting point I would like to make. And now I'll throw it open for a response, a rebuttal, argument, whatever anybody wants. Yeah, please come to the front. Please. Yeah.
Just before you do come forward. Before you do, because I live in Canada but was born in the US. Most of us in the US are unaware that Canada is different than the US because the US is called the melting pot. So the tendency here is to want to melt everyone down and make them homogenous. And that's why this intense struggle for identity comes about. In Canada, they take pride in the fact that they want everyone to remain distinctive and not to melt down. So the struggle to have your own identity in Canada is different than in America, because there they want you, there they want you to have a unique and distinctive identity, and you define it much more graciously. You don't have to fight for it. Here, it's fight or get melted down.
So why don't you sit here? I'll sit there. If there's a chair there? No? Okay.
I was just going to say that I understand, yes, how on the surface level Hindu identity is important because, growing up when you go to high school and that sort of thing, I do take pride in saying that, yes, I'm Hindu, and, when there's a talk on world religions and Hinduism comes up, I strongly stand up. But the only thing that I guess I disagree with is that it's okay on the surface level, but then essentially in Hinduism, what I feel is that when you're giving so many identities to something and you're just getting stuck to it, it's like the idea of Maya, like, that is gold, that this is an ornament is not the reality. The reality is that it is gold. So that's all I wanted to say, that I think people get so caught up on the idea of, oh, I'm Hindu identity, which one, yes, you're being attacked is important, but then when you go deeper into the Vedic studies or whatever, it's irrelevant.
I think this is an important point. If I may, I'd like to give a response to this also. So if you look at Hinduism, non-duality, Advaita, right? Your name is Jay? Jaya. So if you look at Advaita philosophy, non-duality, Vedanta, all of that, there is oneness, there is no difference and so on, at a certain level of consciousness, which we are not at, which we're not at. At that level of consciousness, there would be no devas and asuras, there would be no Mahabharata, there would be no Dharma and Adharma having a battle, there would be no moral dilemmas, because whatever you do, it's all one anyway. But in the world at which we live, there is karma because there is duality. In the world which we live, provisionally in which we live, there is action, there is accountability, there is dharmic action, there is non-dharmic action. So the mere basis of the whole Gita, the basis of the whole Dharma is that in the world in which we currently are, there is difference. Even though ultimately there isn't difference and it's mithya and maya, all those are nice words. And we can intoxicate ourselves, and people have trained us in the 1800s and 1900s to remove Hindu resistance. One of the things the colonizers did from Ram Mohan Roy onwards, they inculcated a whole lot of Hindus to start not resisting by saying it's all the same. So there is no problem. Whether he owns my land, I own my land, doesn't matter. Whether he rules or that rules, who cares? So this has created what is called moral relativism and world negation, a tendency to negate the world and not take social action. And then we as Hindus get blamed for that we are actually not being socially active because we are adopting an escapist philosophy. So if you are a realist, look at society as real, you have to start with empirical things. So as a student, you are concerned about getting good grades. One could say, well, suppose you got bad grades, you didn't get into college, another kid got into college. There's no difference. He got into college and you got into college, the same thing. Difference between you and him is mithya. We could say, if you're buying a car and the guy charged you $5,000 extra, why bother? Because whether the $5,000 is in your pocket or his pocket, it's all mithya, it doesn't matter, it's all maya. But wait, let me finish this. Because I get this a lot from Indians. And I'm making a point here. The point I'm going to make is, when it comes to selfish, what's good for me, Indians are very sharp negotiators. They want the best price for the house, they want the best job, they want a career advancement. In business, they want the best deal. So when it comes to me and what's in it for me, we are very intensely competitive. Then the question of identity is there, because this identity belongs to my company, and this is the competitor's company, and I want more market share for my company. And this is the identity, my house and my family, and I want to maximize the benefits for myself. I am very much identity oriented when it comes to selfish things, be it in my personal life, be it as a student, be it as a professor or a businessman. I'm very much identity oriented, and I'm very fiercely competitive, protecting my identity against others. But when it comes to Dharma, I don't want to do a whole lot. So a convenient excuse is to say, oh, why do we have any identity? So for Dharma, there is no identity, but for me personally, there is a lot of identity. So I always reverse this and ask a person, before you want to advocate a Dharma which is without identity, in the mundane world of identities, you should first become a sannyasi and give up your personal identity. You should give up your personal, all the things you own. Now, we don't want to do that, right? Because it's not a good idea. So we want to have personal identity and selfishness in the realms where we have needs and all that. But in the realm of protecting Dharma, we want to escape by saying, who cares?
No,
That's my response.
what I said is it's on the surface level.
Yeah, can I just say
Hold on.
something?
Let her respond. I'm just holding her on this.
Rajiv Malhotra, I think what she was asking is not that why is the Hindu identity important. She's saying that it's very important to be aware of what the Hindu identity is. What she's trying to say is that when you get past the point where you realize the importance of Hindu identity, why is it then that we're still pushing that, oh, we're Hindu, oh, we're Hindu? We need to realize that Hindu identity is up to a level. After that point, we need to be able to understand and accept everyone. It's not degrading the importance of Hindu individuality, it's being able to understand that it can only take you so far. After a point, you have to understand that, okay, we're Hindu, you're Muslim, you're a Christian, but at the end of the day, we're all children of God. I think that's, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, I think that's what she was trying to ask.
That's very,
Can I respond?
yeah.
Can I respond?
Yeah, please respond. We have 2 mics.
It's a very good question. That when we see that we all are one, right? We all are children of God. Then why is there such segregation? So when Rajiv ji is saying about identity crisis, the true identity crisis is about myself. Who am I? Right? Before I say I'm Hindu, I'm Muslim, I'm Christian, the one who is saying I am Hindu or I am Muslim or I am Christian, who is this I? Who am I? So once if this is understood, this identity is realized, that I am a soul and my real religion, the Swadharma, is peace, which is common to any soul, no matter that soul, if he is belonging to Hindu religion, he is belonging to Muslim, he is a Christian or whoever he is. Every one of us, each one of us here is a soul. And that is our true identity, about being a soul in this body. But when we are not in this identity of being a soul, but when we come into the consciousness of that I am in this body, maybe white body or brown body or black body, then all the other religions start. And therefore there is a disunity. So once we are in this identity that I am a soul, and my religion is peace, no matter even if you are a Christian, what do you want ultimately? Peace? Everybody wants peace. So peace is my true religion, Dharma.
Very good point.
I absolutely agree with some of the points made on this panel. Identity, as Rajivji said and others have said, is forced upon us. You know, in reality, we have to deal with the identity issue. There's no two ways around it. Idealistically, we would love to be able to be in a situation where we don't have to worry about who somebody else is that we're working with in the business level or spiritual level. But we do have to be cognizant that in the Western culture, people identify themselves by their identities in many situations. So here we are in the second and third generation as a community, Indian Americans and mostly Hindu Americans. How do we then make sure that we sustain ourselves in this community moving forward? That is going to be the key. If we look, as Rajivji mentioned, to prior generations of Irish Americans, Italian Americans, what have you, how many of those people who immigrated here now sustain themselves within their faith and their culture 3, 4 generations out? We have to learn from that. One of the things that we faced growing up with our parents having to, as has been said rightfully, prepare the foundation for us, is that we lived in this community not having any identity and trying to assimilate in one way or the other. Are we Americans? Are we Indians? Who are we? I was told that I was an American Indian. People used to joke with me and dance around and go, oh, whoa, 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 when I was in elementary school, and I thought I was an American Indian for a while. So the point is that now we're beyond that. Now we have a basis for identity. Our parents are so successful. We have role models that are reaching the highest levels of offices, public and private. You know, Pepsi, everywhere else. We need to use that to show people that, you know, part of the reason they've grown is because of their faith. If we can have respect and understanding of what our faith is, then it'll be easier for us to accept who we are. And I think that's what we need to do.
Just a quick thing before I give you, you raise your hand. I think it's very important to understand that in our Dharma, there is the Adhyatmic world, where I strive to deconstruct the self. I'm really deep into that in my sadhana. So it's a very it's advice 101 which was said over there. The Adhyatmic or inner realm, where you deconstruct the self, you witness yourself, and it's all Nam-Roop, which is acting, and you try to calm it, and so you live in there more, you go inner and inner, in an identity-free self. And then when you have no more identities left, like I'm not Rajiv, I'm not the son of somebody or a father or this or that, and I'm not really this body or this mind, then I've sort of liberated myself from all the identities and from the body, and then I've attained moksha, and then what I really realized is that truly my identity is as a supreme being. I understand all that, we understand that. We do really understand that. We've had so many talks on that, and we practice it, we understand it. But we are here in also another world, which is a social world. There is Adhyatmic, which is inner, and Lokik, which is worldly. Dharma is both. You are an Adhyatmic being having been put into the Lokik world. So you also have to live according to the Kurukshetra, according to the time, place, context. You have to live in that. So while the inner quest is to become free of all these identities, I have to play a role in the outer world. So which means that the capital I, as they say, the true self, the higher self, the Brahman, the Atman, has to deconstruct the small I of being Rajiv and this man who has all these issues and problems going on. The higher self of I is the true identity I have. But I have been asked to play a role in the social world as in the Leela, as the Rajiv. So while playing the role, while being the I, so capital I, which I understand really well, we can talk for hours on that. while being the capital I, the true Brahman and Atman, the Dharma says that I have been placed here in the Leela to be the role in the role of Rajiv. So I'm talking about Rajiv role having an identity. It's like there is a Leela going on, and I'm supposed to be a cricketer, I'm supposed to be a movie star, I'm supposed to be a beggar. That's the role I'm playing. I know that I'm just acting it, but I'm really someone else. But 24/7, since I was born, I'm playing this role of Rajiv. Okay? So the idea is that I have to understand that's not really who I am. That is one quest. But the outer quest of playing the role of Rajiv, I can't run away from. So the inner quest is not based on running away from the outer journey. This panel is not on how to achieve moksha in a weekend. We are not here for a weekend moksha workshop, frankly. We already have those paths, each of us who have gurus, but we are here trying to understand in the socio-political economic dimension, the society of America that we live in, what is our identity in the roles we are playing. So first I want to clarify this misunderstanding, that being a Hindu, having no identity, is in the inner realm, what we all understand. But the Hindu without any identity, the inner being, is asked to play a role in the Leela where he does have an identity. In this Leela, he is a Kaurav or a Pandav, he is told. He is a Devata, Rakshasa, there are forces like that, we know. So in this outer realm, there is identity. In our case, the outer realm happens to be America. We must understand that Kurukshetra very well and not imagine that this is some Devalok where there are no identities. Okay? So that's a delusion a lot of our gurus have actually propagated because they fail to differentiate between Adhyatma Vidya, which is what you should practice in your private, and the Laukika Vidya of living in the world as a Hindu. This differentiation we haven't had. Therefore, a lot of our people are confused. The moment there is identity, they want to escape from it, they start quoting Vedanta and saying, I have no identity, I'm this higher self. But that is not true in the context of the Leela where the discussion is taking place. So let's make a few principles. One, we are having a discussion about the Laukic world, outward world, the world of Leela. This world does have identities because we're playing roles. And in our particular Leela, it's the American Leela, American context Leela, where we must understand how this identity works here. So now we come to the discussion saying, okay, from a pragmatic point of view, in this outward world of Leela, knowing that I am actually an identified person who was never born and never died, knowing all that, I now have to play this role within identity, within context. Okay? And now the question is, in that role, is there relevance of a Hindu identity? That is a very important breakthrough we made. Yeah.
It had to be made clear, I think.
Yes.
That was confusing.
Yes.
The discussion was something totally different.
Yeah, because the people are avoiding one discussion by quickly putting into another discussion. And our gurus have
That's not
taught
a spiritual level. I mean, we have to reach it, but that is not the main. That's not the
Yeah, you have to live a practical life.
To add to the discussion, I would like to quote an aphorism of Sri Aurobindo. He says that ego was the helper, ego is the bar. Now the idea is that the transcendence of identity or ego is extremely important to have a connection with the spiritual or the divine. But if your ego is not properly formulated or formed, it is an immature ego. What we call in Sanskrit, it is aparipak. It is not right. And if it is not right, in psychological terms, what it is going to lead to is spiritual bypassing. In that case, you will think that you are spiritual, but you have bypassed the whole thing, which asks you to confront many of the psychological issues. And I think that is the reason that the formation of identity is extremely important. If you do not form your identity properly, then the transcendence of that identity is not going to happen. Just like if you do not have a good formation of the ego, then the transcendence of the ego will be.
Thank you very much. Very good.
Come again. I think once we've reached a point where we feel, okay, we've defined the need for identity in the Laukic world of Leela, then I'd like to move to part 2 of our discussion. But let me have just one more comment.
Thank you very much. I want to frame this conversation in terms of the 4 Purusharthas, Artha, Kama, Dharma and Moksha. Are you all familiar with that? Now, most of us in our lives live in the world of Artha and Kama. Your parents, my parents, we live in the world of making money, gaining security, raising a family, etc. When we meet the spiritual people like the gurus and the acharyas, we get introduced to concepts of moksha, Atman, Brahman, etc. What happens very often is that the whole realm of Dharma gets bypassed. The problem with bypassing Dharma is the field in which we form, shape, construct and express our identities. Not just as individuals, but as groups. So, Kundan talked about identity formation, the importance of maturing the ego before you can transcend the ego. That I still think that's at the level of an individual, but there's also the level of forming an identity as a group, as a civilization, as a community. And Hindus have been weak in forming a civilizational identity. It's a civilizational weakness which we are beginning to address with the great work that Rajiv has done and others have done and so on. If you start your lives recognizing the weakness, you will have a far better chance of expressing your dharma in the world responsibly. Because dharma is responsibility, fundamentally. You have a responsibility as a Hindu for the world. You and I have been given this Brahma Jnana, this Vidya, Brahma Vidya, which we have to preserve for ourselves, for future generations, for the world, not just for our Hindus, but also for non-Hindus as well. So that's my point. Thank you.
So why don't you come with, yeah, please come. I had a conversation with a very well-known, I won't name him, Advait Guru, who's teaching Advait. And he said, I do not want to, I recognize the need for identity in the outer Lokic world, the social world. But my students and me are on a path where we are only pursuing the inner world, and we don't need to pursue that world. So I had the following conversation, which I want to just relate to you, and then I'll give you the mic. Just let me finish that, yeah. I'll relate this conversation, just quick one. So I said, Swamiji, do you agree that less than 1% of your disciples will get moksha in this life? He said, not even 1%, maybe not even 0.1%. So we agreed. So I said, therefore 99.9% will be born again, reborn. Do you agree with that? He said, yes. So I said, if 0.1% you're teaching moksha and avoid the Lokic world, they get moksha, they're gone, they're very happy, they're transcended. But 99.9% who ignored this advice, and therefore they ignored the Lokic world, and therefore they let the Lokic world be taken over by whatever asuric forces take it over. They may become a world of radicalized people who don't let you practice the Dharma anymore. Then these 99.9% will be reborn in a future life as one of those fundamentalist people. So let's say in your life, I said, Swami, do you feel that you are achieving moksha? He said, no, I'm not at moksha yet. So I said, therefore there's a 99.9% chance that you will come back. He said, yes. I said, and therefore there's a very high chance that when you come back, by then there may be no Hindus left, and you will have been born in a world where the Leela will be entirely antagonistic to pursuing your Dharma. You may not even be allowed to do all these things. So therefore, what you are optimizing short term for a very tiny number of people is sub-optimizing long term for the mass majority of people. And he had no answer to that.
I want to make a point on what Kalyan said. You talked about Artha, Kam, Moksha and Dharma. But we were more specific on Dharma. But as a very, as an individual, I'll not talk as a group. I don't want to talk as a group because I want to get an answer for myself. I'm very specific. So, in very simple words, being in simple language for a normal human being, just to understand, if we have to work in a group, first we have to understand what we want or what an individual wants. Now my question is, where do I find the answers for things like when, the actual questions on the panel right now, when people pinpoint at us and say, oh, you're an American Indian. Okay, that is a question. How do I answer them? Even to form a community and work with Dharma with us in hand, I should have an answer to, stand in front of them and say, this is not American Indian. I'm an Indian, Indo-American, or Indian who is in America. That's what we have to understand very specifically. So these very small points where we actually miss out, those are the ones that affect the youth. Being a youth, I think that's where the important point is. So forming a group of Dharma and working towards it and getting moksha later is later stage. First give us the arth and then tell us what it is around. Then only we can go and make a community and work together. I think that has to be the discussion. And
good. Good. Yes, please.
I'm sorry, what was your name? Shweta. I just wanted to add one thing to Shweta, is that I think she brings up a really good point, because I don't know about you, but I was born and raised here, so my parents are from India, but their whole life was spent building a life so that I wouldn't have to struggle as hard as they did. So their in-depth knowledge about Hinduism and their background and their culture is not that strong. And while we have a ton of learned people here, think about it realistically. How many people do you interact with on a day-to-day basis who can tell you what's written in the Veda, or who can read Sanskrit or anything, right? So my question is, she has a very good point, is that when we go out there, we can attend these conferences till we're 72, but that doesn't mean anything to us. We need to be able to learn it from a younger age and be able to interact with people like you and Abhinavji and everyone who knows stuff and have an easier source to get that from. I think that's what she's trying to say, and I think that's a very good point.
Yes.
To be very frank, I've not born and brought up in America. I'm Indian born and just 2 years old to America. So,
Yeah.
Finding seeing 2 years of life here itself and, facing problems with all this kind, being an Indian, my Indian friends itself, at wherever I go, I have, pinpointed, like, I have been, asked questions, why are you still like this though? Why don't you just get modern? I said, no, that's my identity, I just want to be like that. And that was not, Americans who are, Indian Americans who are here. They're the people who have come with me from India to be here and to pursue their career here. They have pinpointed on that.
So this
that
is,
most important,
we are at the half point, although we started a little late in the 2-hour session, we are half point. I'd like to move to the second type of issue, which has to do with, if you assume that there is need for an identity, okay, if you assume there is need for an identity, which I do, and I hope we've made a case that there is need for an identity, that we can have this adhyatmic life and moksha dharma, which says you deconstruct all your identity, but there is also the earth, kam, and worldly life and the leela, which role which we have been asked to play, in which we do need identities, because that's the nature of the environment. So if you can buy that for the next hour with me, just please assume that we've made a good case that we need identity because of the circumstances, and for the next hour we're not going to say, well, but why do I need an identity at all? Let's say we've resolved that issue, okay? Because if we have resolved it, and you can take that one message out of this panel into the future, let me tell you, for a lot of you, it's a very major breakthrough. Never come back to this business about I don't need an identity and why do we need? Hinduism doesn't tell you don't need an identity. Even though for moksha you're deconstructing all your identity, Hinduism tells you that in the leela you have to play a role. So as long as we can have a tentative agreement that we will, for the next hour, talk about identity as a positive thing, now we can move to another topic, which is, well, what is this Hindu identity? Now that we have said we do need one, because the problem of defining a Hindu identity has always been subverted by the position that says we don't even need one. So why are you asking a question? Okay, so now that we say we need one, and there is a positive role for it, and he showed there is a positive role, and Kundan said, and you also said, there's a reason for this identity. So now we can move on to describing, well, what is this identity? And how do we handle those who do not subscribe to this identity by their choice? Because they have created an identity for themselves which is very exclusive, which has boundaries, which excludes us. We may be heathen or kafir or whatever. And so by their definition, if we are the outsiders, how do we then deal with them in a very dharmic manner? Consistent with our dharma, which respects all of them, how do we deal with them, even though they don't deal with us with the same respect? How do we give respect to those who do not respect us? Those kinds of issues, that would be the third part. So first part was the need for an identity is real. That was the first part. Second part is, well, what is this identity? Okay? And then the third part will be, how do we, from this identity, deal with those identities that do not give us this respect, and we still want to respect them. So that's the three part, how I would like to structure this. So let's move on to the second part, which is to define what is meant by a Hindu identity. And we're not going to consider anybody who says, I don't even have one because I'm the supreme being and all that kind of stuff. We do have an identity, we do need one, and we're going to now try to define what it is. So are you going to just help us define what is the Hindu identity? And then I'd like some young people also to come up and Panditji also.
I'm sorry, I think that the only idea I thought I had was still trying to support that you need an identity. Except that I was except I was going to speak in a language maybe youths will appreciate more and they can ignore, the rest of other people can ignore. Which is if you really use calculus, you know, you have integration. Now how many of young people have had calculus?
If I can consider myself young.
How many of the older people had calculus? Uh-oh, we are in trouble. Well, at least they will understand, maybe appreciate this. So in calculus, when you learn first time, you always integrate from minus infinity to plus infinity, right? That's the ideal. But when you really solve problems, you are either 0 to, no, now you don't go to infinity, actually you go to x1 to x2, t1 to t2, and that defines identity. Because if you try to do minus infinity to plus infinity, you never get a solution.
So yes. So the infinite consists of finites that we have to deal with. Yeah. So we want now we want part 2. What is the Hindu identity? So we're not going to be worrying about whether we need one and all that. We resolve that. What is the Hindu identity? I'd like to hear a few youth points of view or dilemmas. Saying, okay, whatever your dilemmas are or issues or questions, let some youth speak and then Panditji. Yeah? Okay, come. Any youth? What is the Hindu identity? What do you think Hinduism means to you as a person? Distinct from, in other words, you cannot include in an identity, definition, such that nothing is excluded. Because then Dharma is also being included. Then it means moral relativism. That called moral relativism. That means that everything is just as good or just as bad. So, you know, there is no good food and bad food, all the food is the same. And there's no good karma, bad karma, all the karma is the same. And that is not a valid approach. When they say that all dharmas will lead to the same conclusion, they are only talking about dharmas. They're not talking about adharma, which is the non-dharma. So when they say all dharmas are valid, they're talking about all those paths which are dharmic. And not all paths are dharmic. So the Al-Qaeda path is not dharmic, for instance, or the Ravan's path is not dharmic. And so not all paths are valid, but all dharmic paths are valid. So therefore you have to still define, even though you say it's a way of life, but when a Pandit stood up in a conference when we were talking about Hinduism, and he said, Hinduism is a way of life. So I said, okay, but so is the drug culture. And so is the Al-Qaeda. And so is all those things which this guy would hate. I mentioned them. And I said, therefore they're all dharma, all way of life. And now he was stunned because he had never thought about it, that what you have to define what you are excluding. So in your definition of Hindu identity, I would like you to think about defining it in a way that it excludes something and it includes something, so there is something to strive for, something worth defending, something worth propagating, otherwise it's nonsense. So please. Anybody? So what is Hindu Dharma in such a way that it includes something which is dharmic, excludes something which are not dharmic. Yeah, you please come. You are a young man and a yoga teacher and a practitioner. You will also define. Come. Come.
So when I think about the Hindu identity. I think that it encompasses the slogan, or the phrase that we hear all the time, which is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and to incorporate a global viewpoint. Because, if we live as, I would think that, in a small niche, and that limit, that you were saying, I think that we have to define that limit well, and not say that, we're too small, but not to say that we're too big either. But we do live in a global community, and what aspects or values are across all communities that we all respect, right? Which is compassion, which is mutual respect, and the other person may, a person across from you may not be that way, but how do we learn? We learn from looking at other people sometimes. We learn from others' actions. We learn from experience. So if we encompass that I would say, perspective, then of mutual respect, of mutual compassion, of mutual understanding of others, and accepting others' thoughts, not necessarily adopting them, but accepting them. And that, if you go with that, I don't think that you can really go wrong with that. So that's my perspective.
So a key point is mutuality of respect is very important dharmic element. I do want to comment on the whole world is a family by pointing out that a family does not make them all identical. You can have a family where a bunch of good guys, bad guys, all in family. Some are more knowledgeable, some are less evolved. So when you say the whole world is a family, by itself that statement does not mean we are the same. We are a family, which means we all live together, we have to transact with each other, deal with each other. But there is, like in a family, there's some more senior people, junior people, there's some person who needs help, who's handicapped, somebody's ahead of others, some guy's a crook, some guy's a noble person, they're all part of a family. So the fact that the world is a family does not really translate into anything more than the fact that we all have to coexist with each other. It did not say that we are identical clones. It said we are a family. So there's a difference between identical clones and a family. So that's an important point. But still, the point he made is a very good point, that one of the positive things we can say in the thing called Dharma is mutual respect for all people, for each other. But I really like that he added the word mutual, because I'm going to come to that and make a case that this mutuality has to be reciprocal. This mutuality has to be reciprocal. And just so I warn you where I'm headed, because then you all can talk and you know in advance where I'm headed, I'll give you, put my cards on the table. I'm headed that mutuality has to be a necessary condition before I include the other person. And here's the reason I'm going to give you. In the body, there's a wide diversity of cells, many kinds of cells in the body. But the cancerous cell does not respect the others in the way they all respect each other. The organic, normal, healthy cells respect each other. But the cancerous cell is a predator, which says that I do not respect your integrity. It's not an exchange of between diverse cells that we are trading things and molecules and so on with each other, because I'm going to actually prey on you, and my goal is to convert you to become an identical cancerous cell like me and keep expanding my turf. So the cancerous cell is not believing in mutual respect, okay? And the cancerous cell is that which therefore has a prey. It wants to prey on the cell that believes in all the world is nice family and we all live with each other. And it gives the normal healthy cells, gives falsely, foolishly, mutuality, gives a respect and acceptance to the cancerous cell, and the cancerous cell does not respond in return. So what happens is this cancerous cell is very stupid, because at the end, it keeps, by going on expanding itself, it shrinks its own habitat, because it actually needs nutrients from the healthy cell. The cancerous cell is not self-sufficient. The cancerous cell, like a predator, is not self-sufficient. It needs to eat its prey, and the prey is the healthy cell. It needs to keep expanding once it's metastasized. Okay? That's what a cancerous cell is. It needs to keep going on expanding. And as the cancerous cell continues its agenda of expanding, its habitat keeps shrinking. So what happens is the patient dies in the end. And what happens to the cancer cell when the patient dies? The cancer dies. Because when the no more prey is left, the predators also go extinct. So there's a stupid system of that kind. So therefore, if you say, we respect everybody, including the cancerous cell, well, he's going to get you and finish you off, and then after he's finished you off, he'll have nobody else to finish, and they'll all go after each other in a dog-eat-dog world, which is where we might be headed. And that's not a good thing. So you have to, while remaining sattvic and dharmic and non-violent and ahimsa, you have to find a way to get inside the cancerous cell, infiltrate the guy and somehow turn him around. You have to do that and not just accept him the way he is doing his thing. That's where my position is, and I want to put it on the table, and I'll be arguing, but I want to give you a chance.
Just really quick, 2 seconds. I think, if my understanding is correct of what Mitesh was saying, when he quoted that line about family, I think he was saying not more that we should all be the same, but understand that when you live at home with your family, each and every one of you are individuals, but you live together as a family unit. At the end of the day, you stand strong together because you are connected. So I think what he's trying to say is be able to accept, just because your brother didn't excel or your sister didn't do what you did, it doesn't make her or him any less of a person. Learn to accept everyone around you is what I think he was trying to say. I might have screwed it up.
I just want to make one quick point. I don't know how many of you follow the news out there, but the Pew Foundation, some of you may have heard of the Pew Foundation. I don't know, why is it with me? I promise you that I am a human being. The Pew Foundation recently released a report on religion in the public limelight. They have a detailed report. 87% of Hindus were found to retain their religion from one generation to the next, according to this study. That's the highest of any religious group that was surveyed. So that's a good sign for us, but that means we've just started. You know, we're a recent community in this country, so hopefully we can keep it at that level moving forward. Second point, according to, Hindus believe in the philosophy of pluralism, pluralistic nation, and we hope we can all not only live together, but respect each other, as Rajiv was saying. Hindus, again, highest level of understanding and tolerance and pluralistic approach to other faiths, 92%. Keep in mind, the other major faiths, if you look at from business model as our competitors, are at least a third below that, about 60%. So that means about a third to 40% of those don't believe that other faiths, such as Hindus, should have that same right. So I think the example that Rajiv gave with respect to the cancerous cells, if you apply that practically speaking, I think you know what we're getting at, is that that's the reason we need to have a pride in our identity. Doesn't mean that we have to be crazy about it and be foolish.
We should not become the cancer.
We shouldn't become the cancer, but we cannot be naive to let the cancer take us over, because it is out there.
So a dharmic strategy could be, you keep your healthy body so nutritious, so strong, that you resist the cancer. You don't become the cancer and become violent to zap him with the chemotherapy or radiation therapy or something like that. You don't turn violent on them. But the reason for identity as a healthy cell is so that we understand we are not the cancer, and we understand the cancer is out to get us, and we have to be strong enough to withstand that without turning into a cancer ourselves. So we should ask, as part of that clause, we should always ask, that in our identity, we should always ask that all methods, all ways of conceptualizing the divine and the Supreme Being are allowed to be allowed. You cannot say that the divine and the Supreme Being are only male, and therefore the goddess is to be banned because angry God will come at you. So we have to insist that the whole world of possibilities of conceptualizing the divine that everybody has or will develop in the future have to be allowed as part of what our Dharma says. Secondly, we have to allow this business of we cannot access the divine through images because they have been banned. We don't accept that. We cannot accept that because it's not our way. Yeah, we don't buy into that interpretation. Maybe somebody else got a certain commandment, thou shalt and thou shalt not. But when God was saying thou shalt and thou shalt not, thou means you, not them. And he was talking to you as a certain tribe in the desert. You won't do this, you will do that. He didn't say you have to go and tell them not to do it and tell them not to do that. Thou is a second person, not a third person. So So these are commandments to the people being addressed. And the people being addressed were not in South Asia. They were being addressed somewhere else. And he did not say, I've given you a franchise to go and tell them that. Okay, so you can argue that point. You can say the same divine came to us, to our rishis and our avatars, and gave us different instructions. So it's not my fault. I have to be a Hindu because that's what I've been told. And you have to be doing your thous and thous nots because that's what you were told. And so just like I wasn't given a franchise over you, you were not given a franchise over me. So this is how we have to be able to argue.
Thank you. Let me share something personally. By the way, as an old debater, Mahavakyas don't cut it. We can't make motherhood statements and then sort of say that's it. It doesn't work. It has failed us. In many ways it has failed us. Vasudeva Kutumbakam is a nice thing to say with all due respect, but you know what? It works quite when you're dealing with another culture. I was born in the Caribbean. I left India 170 years ago. I am a Hindu. How did that happen? I swayed. I veered from the path. I lived for 30 years in Ontario. Multiculturalism is embedded and enshrined in the Canadian Constitution. This concept of melting pot, I hate to come back to the first part of the discussion, but this is relevant. The melting pot concept is a falsehood statement. If it were such a great statement, we wouldn't have an issue of argument around identity. We're being duped when we talk about melting pot ideas. It is an idea that went back way back when it's useless. Let me indulge you some yes. Hindus call me Caribbean Hindus, and I find that insulting. And it comes from a place of their own lack of identity, their own struggle within themselves. I have 5 generations of struggle behind me, and trust me, what you're going through now is only the tip of the iceberg. You will intermarry, you will do drugs, you will veer off the tradition, and if you have a strong grounding, you'll come back to the center. If you don't get it now, you'll never get it. Thank you.
You also, please after this. So, let's hear from Panditji.
I wanted to include in this discussion the question of identity. And in order for us to have an identity, we must have a healthy identity. And in order for us to have a healthy identity, that identity must be defined by us, not by someone else. And as I am hearing in this discussion, Hindu identity, is that Hindu first our identity, or it's a term that is given by someone else? And am I going to continue with my identity by using a contaminated identity for my own progress and promotion? And that's the point I want the young children to think about. Am I going to continue using the word Hindu identity or some other identity that I define myself by, so that I can have a healthy identity for others to look at me in a manner the way I want to be looked at? Thank you.
Very good point. Yeah, please, because the word Hindu has been from somewhere else, so I guess that's the connotation.
Swamiji, I just want to make a point to what you said. I think you're absolutely correct, but the problem is that our youth generation is learning from our parental generation, and our parental generation learned and were taught to be Hindus. So we don't have any foundation to even look for something outside of what we have. Our sources are from something that is from India. So well, at least for those of us who were born here, we're already more than slightly disconnected with Bharat. So we're trying to cling on to whatever we have, and that is whatever our parents can give us. So until we're more firmly grounded, Hindu is the only word we have. Once we find a ground, we can expand on that and begin to say, you know what, we're not Hindu, we're this or we're that. But we can't go anywhere until we're grounded in ourselves. And I think that's the only thing I wanted to say, is that your idea is right, but we're just a little bit before that still.
Thank you. Good, very good point. And also, I think that regardless of which word we choose, the name we choose, does not solve the problem if you do not know what's the content inside the box. You can call the box water or pani, but you got to figure out what's inside it. So we still have to first discuss what's the content and the subject matter of what comprises Hindu/Sanatan, Dharma/Dharma, whatever Indian tradition identity. Whatever by name you want to call it, you still have to define what's the content of that, and that's an important exercise.
Hindu is one who follows consciously or unconsciously. This is a broad definition. Hindu is one who follows consciously or unconsciously a path of dharma and or practices that is or are in consonance with a given Weltanschauung or a created Weltanschauung, hitherto absent. This would definitely include all the religions of the world. Second one, which is a narrower part of it, I'm finishing, just 5 more seconds. Hindu is one who follows consciously or unconsciously the path of dharma and or practices that is or are in consonance with Indian Weltanschauungs minus Buddhism. I don't know whether I should call it as an Indian Weltanschauung because they have a separate religious identity. Thank you very much.
I think, of course, the issue is then what is a Dharma and what is a Weltanschauung, and is the Al-Qaeda a Weltanschauung, and is the drug culture a Weltanschauung, and what criteria? If you say it's a way of life which is a Weltanschauung or something, then you move the target to something else, and now you have to define what's a valid Weltanschauung, what's not a valid Weltanschauung, and by what criteria. So really, you've gone around in circle. I would submit you still have to come up with something which is self-referential and does not refer to something else beyond itself.
I mean, not to get off topic here, but I'd like to get back on topic. I mean, we're not answering the question, and I think a lot of the youth here would like to get back to the point is how you reconcile the way, the Hindu identity with identities that directly conflict our way of life. And I mean, I don't know if you can answer that directly, but I don't want to go off topic. I mean, it's a very, very simple question, and I can't answer it myself, and I think it'd be important for somebody to answer it.
The third part. The third part. We spent most of the time on the first part arguing do we even need an identity. We spent a lot of time on that. But it was good progress because most discussions get stuck on that hurdle. At least we've crossed it. From now on, we should not have that hurdle. The second part was well, what might be inside this identity, by whatever name you may call it, but what are the contents? And the third part is how does a person with this identity deal with those who do not subscribe to it, who may even be hostile to it? So in other words, put it very bluntly, how would a person with a Hindu identity deal in America with those who don't think much of Hindus and who have a different identity? What should be our strategy? He's asking that we get back to that point, and I agree.
Okay, I'm just going to give a couple quick closing remarks. I hope that when the youth came here, they weren't looking for answers, but they were looking to their sources who will be potentially putting them on the path to find answers. Please understand that our sources around us, our parents, our uncles, our friends, whoever, there's no one that knows the answers to any of this. So what I want the youth to gain from this is kind of the motivation to go out there and look for the scholars like Rajiv Uncle who can put you in the direction to where you need to be. Older generation, I want you to get something from this too because this was an intergenerational thing. I want you to also be motivated to look into your past because your children are coming to you. They're looking at you for answers. So if you don't have it, you're not helping us. So this is also directed entirely towards you. If you know it, great. If you don't know it, please look it up. We need you to help us. Okay?